Um, and we are live.
Oh, real.
How are you,
I'm doing very well. How are you?
How is the right name to say your family name?
En
Nicieza?
español siempre era Fabian Nicieza. In English, it was Fabian Nicieza, and in American, it's always been Fabian Nicieza. So,
what?
I prefer to go with
Nicieza?
no, it's a joke because Americans can't pronounce anything.
Yeah, of course.
They struggle mightily with foreign names.
My family name is Muñoz.
Muñoz.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Here, you know what? They have less trouble with something like that. Mine was always difficult for them. Too many vowels and too few consonants.
Yes.
And the Z always really scared them.
Yes.
It was always fun growing up watching the teacher in class. Anytime we had what's called a substitute teacher, the regular teacher was out for the day. They go through the roll call for the students in elementary school, and they would just stop the second they got to my name, and everyone in the class knew why they were stopping, because she had no clue how to pronounce my name. So yes. It's something I got very used to.
But the same problem I have here in France with Muñoz, because there's a certain accent that it doesn't exist in French. So
yeah, it's interesting.
all my legal papers is Ivan Munoz.
But it's funny, that one is less of a challenge here in the United States. In America, I think a lot more people could get Munoz without a problem.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of people named Munoz, athletes and things like that.
Of course.
So it's a little more common. I just have I have a difficult name. I know that. I accept that. So
it's cool.
It's pretty much been my norm for my life. When I became a citizen, I was like 19. I couldn't become a citizen until I was like 19. And I had the opportunity to change my name legally at that moment. And there was that one second where I thought I could change my name to something really cool, like Lance Lightning or something like that.
Yeah,
and I just decided I stuck with boring old Fabian Nicieza.
Yeah. You could be Fabian Kirby, or
I could have been Fabian Kirby. I could have been Fabian Lee, and it would have been a lot easier to sign my name. Wait, where'd my camera go? There we
go. No, but it's good. That's why it makes your name special, and people remember it.
People do remember it for good and bad. Yes, they do. They don't have a problem remembering that one.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you for doing this. I'm a big fan of. Especially, I'm a big comic book fan, but especially from the 90s and 2000 period.
Sure.
So
you were probably
I don't know if you can recognize this. Especially this. This is
X-Force #1.
X-Force was something that was really cool. Me and my best friend were a huge fan of X-Force. Like X-Men is for pussies. X-Force is the.
Let me guess. You were about 12 years old at the time.
No, not really.
14. 12 to 14.
Yeah, I was kind of a teen, but I think was the time when Punisher was really huge, and everything in Marvel has that kind of extreme version, like more.
Yes, we all got very excited by MTV.
Yeah.
Everything had to be faster, bigger, more exaggerated. But we also had a younger audience than the comic book. Mainstream Marvel DC comics right now are honestly selling to 36 to 46-year-old men.
Yes.
And for the most part, and the ones that are purposefully meant not to sell to 36 to 46-year-old men do nothing but get the 36 to 46-year-old men angry. So the companies are in a bind because they can't. They're in a no-win situation. If they're not doing something that specifically only appeals to very narrow-minded adult men, then they get yelled at by the fans.
Yes. But for me, I'm open to everything. I appreciate that time because it's connected with a lot of memories.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I'm not that kind of comic book guy that is really like, no, but why you have to integrate black people and gays? It's not like before.
That's because you're a man of European culture. That's why.
Yes.
Here, on the other hand,
Yes.
I've always contended, and more so as I've gotten older, that we men who are comic book readers are forever bound emotionally to the comics they read when they were like between the ages of 10 and 16.
Yeah, of
Those
course.
are the most important comic books in our lives, right?
Mm.
So nothing, even the great stuff that we saw in the 80s from Walt Simonson and Frank Miller on Daredevil, then Alan Moore and all of that stuff, Dark Knight,
Mm.
none of that stuff for me will ever resonate as much as the Avengers I read when I was a teenager, or Captain Marvel or Warlock by Jim Starlin, and those kinds of books. It's just an age thing, so
Yes.
if you were 14 when X-Force #4 was coming out, that's your thing.
Yes.
I totally get that. For the same token, I don't need it to be my thing for the rest of my life.
Yeah, of course.
I'm a 58-year-old man. I don't need X-Force to, I don't need
To define
Avengers.
you.
Yeah, I don't need Avengers to be what it was when I was 14.
Yes.
It can be whatever they want it to be right now,
Mm.
and I have the choice of reading it or not reading it.
Yes. No, but you're an artist. Artists have to evolve and try different things. And
Yeah, absolutely. But the audience has evolved too.
Mm.
The problem is that we used to do it in a way that purposefully took into account that every 5 years we may be cycling in a new generation of readers. So we tried very hard to balance our approach so that a reader who's been reading a book for 10 years or 15 years will get something out of the book, but a reader who's only been there for a little while, a year or two, will have the information they need to understand what's going on. So it made a lot of the comics back then a little bit thicker and wordier than they are today. But
Yeah.
right now, almost every single creator I see working for Marvel and DC is specifically writing to an audience of older people who have been reading comics for 30 years, or the exact opposite,
Yes. To
completely
capture
new
the
readers, and they turn it into something that has no connection to the previous existence of the comic.
Yeah, it's
So
like two worlds.
yeah, they've lost
Coexisting
the sense or the interest or the ability. I don't know, because I'm not in the office every day seeing what goes on. They've lost the ability to balance that. I find it very frustrating as a reader, because I'm an old man, and if I'm going to read a superhero comic, I want to read it because I want to entertain the kid in me. I don't want to entertain the adult in me. If I want to entertain the adult in me, I'll read a historical nonfiction book. I don't. I shouldn't need a Superman comic or an Avengers comic to entertain the adult in me. I wanted to push the buttons of the 12-year-old in me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm sorry, but we completely go in another direction. I will ask you if you can introduce yourself to the audience, so people that don't know you. In a very brief.
Hi, I'm Fabian Nicieza. I'm an old man who's been doing this for 30 years. Get off my front
Or maybe
lawn.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it for you. I'm glad to introduce famous comic book writer Fabian Nicieza. That well, for me, especially as a comic book fan, I noticed his work with correct me if I'm wrong, the New Mutants, especially with Marvel. I don't know if you made DC too.
Let's go. Cyforce, New Warriors,
Cyforce,
X-Force,
right? The new
X-Men,
universe. Yeah.
Thunderbolts, Cable and Deadpool, co-created Deadpool. Running through the amount of credits and titles is going to
Yeah, we
take up
can
the
spend
entire
hours.
hour. I've written for Marvel, for DC. I've written for Dark Horse. I've done animation work. I've done video game work. I've done intellectual property work. I've done standard print comics. I've done web comics, and currently I consider myself a book writer because I sold my first book late last year, and I'm currently working on my second book now.
Oh, that's great.
So I don't think of myself I think of myself as a writer, period, because I work in a wide
Ah,
variety of
yes.
things
I'm
on a
sorry for
regular.
the
Yeah,
for
I'm
the
always doing
introduction. Comic book
something.
writer is so narrow.
Yeah, I don't want to think of myself as a book writer, but it
Yeah.
just sounds so pretentious that I may just call myself that from now on. Yes, hi, I'm a book writer. Hello.
No, it's great. It's like a musician, you know. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't say.
I'd rather not just play all the same songs
Mm,
that I wrote, 30 years ago. I'd rather get a chance to try to create some new music as well.
sure. No, for me it's the same with music. I love metal, but I love electronic music also, and I love hip hop, and I love different styles. So it's hard for me to define me in a category. It's like put yourself in a box, and especially when you're an artist, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, I never I really gravitated away from just focusing my work on comic books.
Hmm.
Probably after I left Acclaim Comics, I was the president and publisher, editor in chief at Acclaim Comics for a little over 2 years, and that was in 1998. And
Hmm.
I left without knowing what I was going to do next. And I left on a Friday, and on Monday I got a call from Marvel offering me the Gambit book, and I thought, oh, I guess I'm a comic book writer again, But I never wanted to think of myself as just that because I always wanted to do other things. So really, the last 20 years for me has not been avoiding comics, not in the least. If I'm offered something that interests me, I like to do it. But always looking for different things to work on. So
Hmm.
I've done all different kinds of stuff that no one knows about because it's not sold on the direct market comic book shops
Can you
shelves.
can you can you tell us a little about it?
I've been doing intellectual property management with a company in Manhattan called Starlight Runner. We've been doing that for 20 years. It's freelance for me, but we've
Hmm.
worked on major Hollywood motion pictures from 2004 until just a couple years ago. Worked on Pirates of the Caribbean. Worked on Tron. Worked on James Cameron's Halo. James Cameron's Avatar. We worked.
And
Uh, uh,
what you do there
well,
exactly?
it's really hard to explain, but it ultimately ends up being kind of a combination of a brand analysis of a property and a DK encyclopedia. If you're familiar with that, it's a publishing brand called DK that creates these kinds of entertainment property encyclopedias, and we kind of
Okay.
merge those two things, and we're doing the service for a client, whether it be a Hollywood studio or a video game company or a retail brand. We've worked for Coca-Cola, we've worked for Pepperidge Farms, and in essence, we're creating a narrative Bible for them to explain to them what their property is, what their franchise is, what the themes of the stories are, what the nature of the characters are, what the archetypes of the characters are. Really get into a nitty-gritty aspect of the
Yeah.
DNA of a
Well,
property.
that's really interesting
It is interesting. I mean, some jobs are better
and
than others,
funny.
but I've been on the sets of multiple movies, meeting and talking to the directors and the actors and all that stuff. Working hand in hand, usually with the studio's marketing divisions to really help them understand the property they have, how to
Mm.
brand it, and how to try to franchise it if it's a franchisable property. Um,
You it never for the first time when they tried to do Deadpool in the X-Men movie.
yeah.
No, I think it was Wolverine.
Mhm.
Wolverine. I can remember the name.
Yeah, it was Wolverine. Wolverine
But
Origins.
yeah, what happened there? They
I
contact.
don't know.
They never
I
contact.
the first time
They
I
needed
ever
a book like that. I think. like
Yeah, they definitely needed a book like that at Fox when they were doing the X-Men movies. Yes, they certainly did. And we tried to get work through Fox, and we did on Avatar, but we tried to get involved in the X stuff, and it just never ended up happening. It really amounts to a group of people who are given characters that they are asked to develop, but they have really no understanding or connection to who those characters are and what makes them work, why they work for the audience they're being sold to. Ironically enough, in this particular instance you're talking about, the one person in that entire production who understood the character and how the character worked was the actor, Ryan Reynolds. Okay, no one else did. The writer clearly didn't. The director clearly didn't. Ryan Reynolds understood and knew that this wasn't the right thing to do with the character, but he was an actor. He was hired as an actor. But when he got the opportunity to develop the property the way he knew that it should be developed, it resulted in the first Deadpool movie. So I don't even care one way or the other about the Wolverine Origins movie. It was just awful. They did a really bad job. So what? And move on to the next thing. It didn't matter to me. The only thing is when I left that theater and I saw it for the first time at a Marvel screening. So all the Marvel personnel were there. My friends were there. They all turned around and looked at me and just shook their heads like this. And I put my hands up like, what are you gonna do? And I left the theater and I'm thinking to myself, oh well, there goes any check I'm ever going to get for a Deadpool movie. Lo and behold, 9 years, 6 years, 7 years later, whatever it was, that they get a chance to make the movie, and it's a huge success. So it just goes to show you the importance of when you're expanding things onto other platforms. You're taking a book and making it a movie or a TV show or a comic book character or a video game. You have to have creative people that are invested in what it is and why it works, rather than trying to interpret and put their opinion of what it is and why it works onto a property. Because the truth of the matter is they don't know. They're only guessing. And oftentimes they're guessing wrong. Because if you change what something is, if you sew up Deadpool's mouth, you are automatically insulting a huge portion of the fans' base, right? So you've already
the character.
Yeah, you've already lost. You already lost creatively when you do that. And if you don't even realize that, it just shows you that you shouldn't even be involved in that movie to begin with. Whoever the writer was, I don't remember at this point, whoever the writer was, whoever the director was, they probably shouldn't have even been involved in that movie to begin with, because they didn't really have a fundamental understanding or caring of the material,
It made me, I don't know, you saw a documentary about the Superman movie that was supposed to be Kevin Smith.
Tim Burton and Nicolas Cage thing.
And I remember they make a documentary. I don't know if you saw it. And Kevin Smith tell that the producer, he was telling, we need a giant spider and this and that. And he said, why don't you do it? Superman doesn't work like that. But
to me,
it's the people that finally give you the check to make the movie. So I think, well, I'm not sure. I'm not into that world, but I think maybe when the people that have like the economic power to make your movie make too many decisions, that they wrong decision, like you were saying. Even if you have someone like Kevin Smith, like is a really he perfectly know the character and everything. If he have someone on top of him telling do this.
It depends. Look, the people who finance the movies, the producers who delegate the money, they often think they know best. And in my experience, 99% of the time, they don't know anything.
Mm,
creatively speaking, content speaking.
mm,
They're best served when they're smart enough to hire people who do know
mm,
what they need to do with the characters,
yeah,
and then just stepping out of the way. I mean, Disney is smart enough to know that
yeah,
they can let Kevin Feige run the Marvel Studios
yeah,
program, and Kevin Feige is smart enough to hire people who he thinks will bring an interesting approach and an understanding of the characters
mm,
to the movies they're going to work on, and it's very rare to find that kind of a combination in Hollywood, and it's no surprise that the Marvel movies have succeeded the way they have,
mm,
because they were able to find that almost impossible combination. The head of production also innately understands the properties that he's
mm,
developing,
yeah,
and hires people that he hopes and expects will add to that understanding rather than take away from it or combat it. And all
sure,
you need to do is look at all the problems that Warner has had in the way they've approached it, and see how valuable someone like Kevin Feige is
mm,
for entertainment platforms like movies.
yeah. No, for me, it's crazy to see the evolution, and like in the superhero movies, like I don't know, the first Spider-Man, but I'm talking about the 70s. I don't know,
The TV show from the
yeah,
70s, yeah.
yeah. They make a movie too. I remember, and there was a Captain America movie too.
In the
But
in the early 1990s, there was a Captain America movie from
yeah,
Canon Pictures.
yeah,
This was the Captain America movie with the Italian Red Skull.
yeah, and Nick Fury with David
Yeah,
Hasselhoff.
that was a television movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that they made.
they were trying to do stuff, but it never kind of worked.
Well, there's a
And
million reasons why,
yeah, of course.
but the probably the single most important is that technology didn't exist to make it work as best
Mm,
as it could. One of the reasons why it's worked as well as it has in the last 12 years to 12 to 20 years is
mm,
because technology got us to the point where we can successfully put some of this kind of material on film,
mm,
or in TV.
yeah,
And you couldn't. All you got to do is look at Star Trek from 1968 and then look at
I
Star
love it.
Trek from today and take a look at the differences in the visuals and the special effects
Yes.
and everything else. And really, the movies were able to begin to depict the scope and scale of the stories that you see in comic books.
Mm,
To the point now where unfortunately sometimes the comic books can't even keep up with the movies in terms
yes.
of how they're depicting scope and scale.
Yeah, but also I think it's a kind of I I don't know if the word is respect the source material, but kind of use the source material, the comic, the stories, because sometimes uh, before with all movies, they were trying to take the character and create a whole new scenario, completely disconnected, uh, with other characters that nobody knows. And I think the last, I don't know, decade or couple of decades, since, I don't know, for you, what was the what is the breaking point when for example superhero movies start to doing something right, like, I don't know,
Oh, I
Iron
mean,
Man,
I
X-Men?
I think no. I think that you can go back as early as the first Superman movie to see
Yeah,
how you're able to take source material and do it
yes,
right.
you're right.
And it's not a perfect superhero movie, but
Hmm,
it stands the test of time as an excellent movie.
yeah,
Every movie since then, to one extent or another, had aspects of it that tried to get it right,
hmm,
all the way through. The release of Blade was one of the most important aspects for Marvel because Blade showed that you can take even comic book content that very few people knew about, and craft it into a very successful, financially successful motion picture. And Blade's success actually paved the way for X-Men. But don't forget, we had 4 Batman movies in the late 80s, early, all through the 90s, all of which made tremendous amounts of money. I'll be in that long line of people that question the quality of some of those films. But that's secondary to proving that there's business there. What ends up happening is that the minute the studios understand that there's business there, then they start assigning development and consider development of different properties. And what really happened is that the producers and directors who started to have an interest in this content were of an age where they grew up, where comics weren't Pam, Bow, Wap 1960s Batman stuff. There wasn't it was a generation, people like Bryan Singer and people like Sam Raimi, who didn't grow up thinking comics were stupid or thinking that comics were supposed to be childish. They grew up believing that these stories had merit and that these characters had dramatic conflict built into them. So people like Bryan Singer and Sam Raimi understood in a way that some of the previous producers and directors didn't how you can turn this stuff into viable, dramatic action adventure movies. And once X-Men and Spider-Man started rolling in that capacity, then it just sort of cemented the idea that we need to take this seriously. These are not campy cartoons. These are dramatic adventure stories. Let's treat them that way. So by the time Jon Favreau made the Iron Man movie, I think that we were already well on our way towards trying to take this stuff more seriously in Hollywood, and Hollywood respecting it more, and the people in power. If you're 45 years old and you're an executive at one of the studios in 2005 or whatever, you don't have the same mentality as someone who was 45 years old in 1978 was about comic books. So a lot of the people who were in positions of power were actually comic book readers growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So you could say to them, I love, what about Walt Simonson's Thor? Oh, I loved Walt Simonson's Thor. They understand, and there's a better connection to the material that way. That's really why it ended up turning around. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't a light switch. It really was just a generational assumption of power for who the decision makers in Hollywood were going to be, and those new decision makers had a better understanding of the source material and a better awareness that it could mean business for them.
Oh, that's really well explained. I feel like in a masterclass of
it's my job. But it's what I'm getting paid the big bucks for here.
Yeah, that's great. You give some. We take you seriously, even if you're talking about.
I've got to be honest with you. I've been doing this crap for over 30 years. So if I haven't figured something out by now, then I'd be a real moron, wouldn't I?
Yes. No, but it's great. But I would like to take you back, but probably people always ask you, well, how you start to doing comics and everything, and you always have to maybe tell the same story. But how you start to make comics?
Well, that was a long way around asking the same question. The story is very simple.
What's
little boy immigrates into the United States from Argentina, starts reading comics when he's very young because his older brother started buying them, because we recognize Batman and Superman. They help us learn how to read and write English faster. Both my brother and I always drew, so we drew superhero stuff. I grew up wanting to become a writer, and understanding that you didn't graduate college and get a job as a writer. You needed to get a job in a field that gave you the opportunity to write. And I got a job at a paperback book publishing company out of college. And then a couple of years later, a job opened up at Marvel Comics. So I applied for that job and I got it. And a few months after that, I applied for another job within Marvel, and I became Marvel's advertising manager. And I was there 9 to 5 every day. And that gave me the opportunity to try to start selling my stories to the editors. And little by little, I started to sell more and more stories. And I got a monthly book really quickly, and then that monthly book got canceled. So I just sold more stories, and then started getting assignments like New Warriors and then New Mutants and Alpha Flight, leading to X-Men.
But your first one was Cyforce?
Cyforce number 9 is my first issue published.
Because that was in the 90s, I think.
No, that was in the 80s. That was 1987. It was New Universe. It was a New Universe book.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think
you sound like I'm surprising you when I say that. Yes, I know it was a New Universe book. I wrote it.
I really think that was kind of how I can say, like a challenging idea. Like, we will gonna build a whole universe, independent from all the characters that gave us money.
It was an idea that even many of us in the office thought was rather unique. Let's celebrate the 25th anniversary of Marvel by launching a whole new universe that has nothing to do with the characters that got us to 25 years. And that's what New Universe was. I was the advertising manager whose job it was to try to sell those books. So I saw the challenge in that, and there were plenty of things about that line that I didn't agree with or think was good, but at the end of the day, it afforded me an opportunity to try to write, because the books were the schedule on the books was really, really bad. They were having a really hard time getting established creative talent to want to work on those books. So it opened up an opportunity for someone like me, who was in the office but hadn't written anything yet, to get a chance to sell stories. And I sold Cyforce number 9, Codename Spitfire number 11, and Cyforce number 13 were my first 3 stories, and I did them all in about a 3-week span. And then I got assigned Cyforce as a monthly comic. So within just a couple months, I was a monthly comic book writer after not having done anything prior to that until those first sales. So for me, New Universe was great because it gave me the opportunity to write, period. The books may have been good or bad for different people's qualitative judgment. The sales were really bad on a lot of those books by Marvel standards. And it was a questionable promotional approach to the 25th anniversary of the company. But I'm never going to have a problem with New Universe.
Why questionable?
I don't know that it's smart to celebrate 25 years of something by doing something completely new and different. I don't think that really does. I don't think that really adheres to the message of what a 25th anniversary of something is supposed to be. It's not just a 25th anniversary of Marvel Comics, because Marvel Comics, in one way or the other, had been around since 1939. Right. So it's really the 25th anniversary of Fantastic Four number 1 and the start of the Marvel Age of Comics, which started in 1961. So New Universe, which was launched in 1986, was supposed to be the editor-in-chief's publishing program to help celebrate Marvel Comics. On the one hand, you could say what's more of a celebration than creating something exciting and new? You can make that argument, but it's not an argument that many readers, comic book shops, or creative professionals really bought into.
Yeah. No, I at the time I think was really bold, but I couldn't understand.
Yeah, no kidding. No, and look, there was a lot of good ideas in it, and a lot of good talent came out of it. We got a lot of good creative people through the door at Marvel who turned into really solid creators for the company. Not myself notwithstanding, you guys like Javier Saltares and Mark Teixeira
Sure.
and Ron Lim, they all came in through New Universe. Paul Ryan came in through New Universe. So we got
it's like in a show when you're the opening band. Was
yeah.
like
yeah. No, it was a great way for a lot of talent to get a chance to feel their way through the process of creating monthly comics.
And the idea of create well, I think you were, of course you were working there at the time. Was just an economic incentive, like we wanna sell more, or was really like we were gonna create this space to taste new talent?
No, look, it was the editor-in-chief's decision and creative impetus to do this. It was the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, who wanted to do this.
Okay.
There's lots of different opinions and thoughts as to why he wanted to do this, why he thought this was a good idea. But at the end of the day, the publishing program always called for a thinning out of some books and an introduction of new books. And usually that amounted to roughly anywhere from 8 to 12 titles a year that you're either adding or thinning some out and replacing. And that was a natural cyclical kind of a thing. Some things got canceled and a book was created to replace it. And then because the company's success was increasing pretty much yearly, then you add a few more titles as well to the budget. You add 2 editorial offices to the staff, and you hire more people. So it was in that capacity. It was not a tremendous imposition on the publishing program. It was kind of a natural extension to the way things were being done. The only difference was that it was going to be 8 titles, which were going to draw a tremendous amount of promotional advertising dollars and effort. It was going to require a tremendous amount of commitment on the part of the sales department and commitment on the part of the retailers to order the books. And none of them had a connection to Marvel Comics.
It's like create a new whole brand.
In essence, you're creating a whole new brand. And once again, the question is, why are you creating a whole new brand the year that you're celebrating Marvel Comics 25th anniversary? So
but it doesn't matter. It's still, I think it's create I know, like a memory, like a little impact.
Yeah, you were really young. I mean, you're honestly, you were too young to really understand what was wrong or right about it at that time. And like I said,
like a business decision, I don't think was the best.
It wasn't the best.
So after they give you the chance to you were writing Cyforce, then what?
Well, Cyforce was canceled along with all the New Universe books with like issue 32, and I thought I'll get a monthly comic in a week. I'll get another title to replace it just like that. An editor's gonna offer me a monthly book. Didn't happen. So I basically spent about a year really trying to sell anything I could. Inventory stories, which were completed issues that sat in a drawer until the schedule needed them. I started to sell annual backup stories for all the Marvel annuals. I started to get an opportunity to sell a lot of 8-page stories to a comic book that we were going to be producing called Marvel Comics Presents, which was going to be a weekly anthology title. And because it was weekly, it was going to run through a lot of material, which gave a lot of us opportunities to sell work. So that was almost an entire year. That was like 88 into 89, where that's predominantly the majority of what my writing was, on top of my full-time job. And in essence, I had to reprove myself to the editors that I could write superheroes, because after the New Universe was canceled, the knock on it was that they weren't really superheroes like Marvel Comics are, So I had to reprove myself to editors, and ultimately the real opportunity for me to do that was New Warriors. When I got New Warriors and and we were doing really good work with it, and it succeeded far more than what they had anticipated it would, and it was received critically and by fans in a far better manner than they thought it was going to be. That really cemented me internally at the office among the editors, but more importantly externally among an audience and among a retail base, that I'm someone who could write a good comic that can sell copies for them. So New Warriors really was it. And my editor on New Warriors, Danny Fingeroth, really knew that we had something good going before most people did, because we had 6 issues done before the first one even came out. So he was well aware of how good this was turning out. He offered me another book. He offered me Alpha Flight, and I said yes because I wanted, not because I said yes, not because I had any great love for Alpha Flight, because I really didn't. I said yes because I wanted to prove to the editors that I can write 2 books a month and still do my staff job without any kind of issues dealing with schedules or timeliness or anything like that. So I said yes to Alpha Flight. And it was while I was writing Alpha Flight and New Warriors, and the books were coming out, the sales were increasing. Alpha Flight sales increased quite a bit when we started. New Warriors doubled its sales in its first year. It increased its sales twofold in the first year. That's when I got offered New Mutants to script over Rob Liefeld's plots and pencils on New Mutants, and we did that knowing that it was going to become X-Force just a few months later. So that became my entry into the X books.
No, that's great, and I always find very original the characters in New Warriors. When they give you the chance to write it, you feel that, like, that potential that, I don't know.
I couldn't wait to get the chance to write it. It took the editor many months to make the decision as to who was going to write that book. And that entire time was very difficult for me because I wanted to write it really badly. I knew that I could do a good job on that book. I knew I could do a better job on the book than any other writer he may have been considering at that time.
And why you were so excited? What you like it?
Because to me it was my opportunity to do Marvel's version of Marv Wolfman and George Perez's Teen Titans. It was my opportunity to do a book that would catch a lot of people by surprise, be really ridiculously good, be really fun, fold in a lot of interesting characters that were established, new, and had great ties to existing continuity. The wonderful thing about Titans is that Marv and George knew brilliantly how to fold in all different kinds of aspects of DC's continuity and make it work by the use of these young teen, or, by that point they're all 18, 21, how to fold it in and make it work. I had New Warriors, and I understood inherently that I had a bunch of characters, all of whom had interesting connections to different aspects of the Marvel Universe, which would give me an opportunity to use this book to stretch out and touch a Fantastic Four related things or Avengers related things and fold them all smartly into the book just by the nature of the characters I had available to me. So I knew that I knew that it had the potential to be a really fun, entertaining comic book, and I wanted to write something that would have made the 14-year-old in me excited to get it on a monthly basis. And quite honestly, I did that. I mean, that's what we did. Mark Bagley and I and Derek Robertson and I, we created a comic book that if you were 12 and 13 and you were smart in buying that instead of the X books, you really, really would have loved it.
Yeah, no, I remember the characters were really, but I can remember exactly all the characters. It was Night Thrasher. No.
Yes, it was Night Thrasher, Nova, Namorita, Marvel Boy who became Justice, Firestar, Speedball. Then I added a character called Silhouette who we created for the book, and I took Rage out of Avengers and put him into the book too. So,
what was the girl that was disabled?
That was Silhouette.
that blew my mind. That really, when I was, it was great, because I was thinking, why he take the chance to go out and fight crime when you're disabled, you know?
Well, because she has the ability to melt into the shadow, into the
Yeah.
dark force. That's the cheat she had on her side.
No, but
um,
that was really original. It had the same impact for me when I saw Charles Xavier the first time. When I was really, really little, I said, "What the fuck? A superhero in a wheelchair?"
well,
It's like, no, but it's
Charles
great.
wasn't much of a hand-to-hand combat artist, was he?
Yeah, no, but it's just one of the more powerful mutants on the planet. But
Yeah, I thought Silhouette was a really, really interesting character. I think that Marvel editorially dropped the ball
Mm.
for many years
A Night
by
Thrasher
ignoring her.
also um, a millionaire that is is not Batman.
Oh yeah, no. Look, I didn't create it. The characters were all put together, and Night Thresher was created by Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz. They put the team Bible
Okay,
together, and then
but
we
you
were gonna.
create Silhouette.
What? Yeah, I created Mark Bagley and I created Silhouette,
Okay,
but we inherited the characters who were going to be on the team.
yes,
Yes, Night Thresher's origin was nothing more than Batman, and that's fine because there's plenty of
like
characters
it
whose
was black.
origins are nothing more than Batman. There's only so many Argent templates available to us, and many of them are repetitive.
No, but what I think was original, he was black.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, Tom again wanted diversity in the book, and we had diversity a little bit from its introduction just by having Night Thrasher and Namorita, who's half Atlantean, and you need to use that as your access point to stories about diversity.
Mm,
But if you look at New Warriors as it evolved, as I wrote it over the course of 4 years, you're not likely to find a more diverse title, and that was 30 years ago. So all the people who
yes.
whine and complain about diversity in comics today are the very ones who were reading New Warriors 30 years ago and didn't even realize it was right in front of their face all along.
Yes, of course. No, but you did a great job there. And then was the New Mutant, no?
New Mutants was when I was writing X-Force, when I was writing New Warriors and Alpha Flight. They asked me to script it off of Rob's plots and pencils, and I said yes because I knew it was going to be fun. I knew it was going to sell well, and scripting is a lot easier than full writing is for me. So I thought it was going to be a real easy paycheck, and ultimately it turned into kind of an explosion that was even bigger than we thought it was going to be. We knew it was going to be a big success on top of the sales New Mutants had at that time, but we didn't expect that it was going to have that same level of explosion that happened alongside Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man and what Jim Lee's X-Men #1 was going to do. We knew it was going to do really, really well, but we didn't expect it was going to sell 6 million copies or whatever.
What?
So,
6 million copies?
yeah, for X-Force #1. And X-Men #1 by Jim Lee
This
was
one?
8 million copies, and that's still the #1. We were the #1 best-selling comic in the history of the industry for 2 months, and then Jim Lee's and Chris Claremont's X-Men #1 became the #1 selling comic in the history of the industry, and nothing I don't think has topped it since. So that was a lot of those copies were non-returnable copies sent to the direct market. A lot of those copies were anticipated were going to be purchased by collectors who were going to be buying 5 or 10 copies of #1 of each book. So I'm not saying we had 6 million readers because I don't think we did, but it still sold more than anything else had up to
How
that
was
point.
that feel
How
on
did it
that
feel?
moment? Yeah.
It was exciting. I always wanted the material to be better for
You feel
what
like I made it.
what? No,
You feel
no,
like No.
No, not really. Not for me, because I'd already made it. You know what I mean? What you don't have that much control over whether you sell 250,000 copies or whether you sell 1,000,000 copies. You don't. That's kind of out of your control. What's in your
Okay.
control is the ability to create stories that entertain readers. That's in your
Mm.
control. And I'd already done that. I felt already
Ah,
very
okay.
comfortable with doing that. You got to understand. For me, I New Warriors #1 sold 126,000 copies to the direct market. New Warriors #12 had sold 250,000 copies to the direct market.
Mm.
So we doubled our sales in a year. I didn't need
That's
any
great.
outside validation telling me that I can do my job.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it was ridiculously exciting because of how big it was, and
Mm.
also, quite frankly, it was ridiculously exciting because we got paid incentives on the sales of the book. So the
Mm.
higher the book sold, the more money you were going to get in an incentive check. 10 months later, once the newsstand sales were already accounted for. So I knew I was going to be getting some really big checks. And that was great because the money was fantastic. And I'm not going to say no to a big check from the
Of
company,
course.
and my wife isn't going to say no to being able to put a deposit on a new house. So for that point in my life, I was 31 at that time. It's a very important part in a time in your life because you're establishing yourself as an adult. I'd already established myself in my career, but this was giving me a chance to establish myself in my life. I could buy a house, I could decorate that house, I could plan for my future kids' college education off of the money I was going to be making off of the sales of the book. So that's how I was thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it as in 6 million in sales validates my work, because I don't think it did. I don't think so. I really don't, because I don't think it was work that was worthy of 6 million in sales.
No, but that's great. That's proof that you're a true artist.
No, it proves that I'm a rational adult.
Yeah. Also.
I've always tried to be a rational adult in an irrational world. The
Mm.
world of comics is a really odd
Yeah. Of course.
creature. It's an odd industry filled with very many odd people, and I always tried to be a relatively rational adult in that.
Talking about that, I'm sure you made a lot of conventions and you signed a lot of books during your career. You
A
have
few.
a funny story, like a fan that really kind of, I don't know,
No,
catch your attention.
no. Usually the fans are great. They almost always are great. My single favorite one, because it was so goofy, happened many years ago. It was like 1993, 1994, and we were signing at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was a row of people signing, so it's not even the chance to look up and really talk to a lot of people because they're cycling a huge line through a row of us signing. And one guy came up and didn't have a comic to sign. And I looked up at him and I said, "You don't have anything to sign?" He goes, "No, I just wanted to tell you that I think you sucked. You suck."
What?
And I go, "Really?" And there's people gathered around the table, both Marvel employees and fans, just hanging around. And the line was long. I said, "How long did you just wait in line?" And everyone around's like, I go, "How long's the line?" He's like, 90 minutes. I go, "You waited in line 90 minutes just to tell me that I sucked?" And he goes, "Yup." And I go, "Was it worth it?" And he goes, "Yup." I go, "All right, have a great day." and he leaves. That's it. He just leaves. And everyone's going, "Oh, come on." And I was like, "Guys, listen, the only way he can know that I suck is if he bought the book and read it. If he bought the book and read it, that's all you can expect as the writer of the book, number one. And he's entitled to his opinion. More importantly, number two, if he bought it, that means I already made the money off of it." So he waited 90 minutes and paid me to tell me that I sucked. So it was totally
Wow.
fine by my standards.
But what book? For what book he was
It
complaining?
was during the X stuff. It was during the days of the X stuff, and I'm sure that he
Okay.
was an old X-Men fan who wasn't happy with the changes we were making in the X
Okay.
books, because that's when Chris Claremont stopped writing them, and I took over one book, and Scott Lobdell took over the other. So he was probably a disgruntled older X fan, which was ironic because I had been an X fan probably earlier than he was, because I bought the Giant Size X-Men #1, off the rack at the store when I was like 13, 14 years old, and I was a disgruntled X-Men fan too.
Yeah, of course. It's no, but it's stuff that happened. And so when you and Alethal create Deadpool, but I'm sure that you always people ask you this question. What you were thinking? What was the inspiration to creating Deadpool?
I have 7 pages of script left on this issue, and it's Thursday night, and the script is due Friday morning, and I finally write this mercenary character who's here to kill Cable, and I don't feel like writing him like a mercenary character, so let me make him a bit of an ass, a wise ass, because that'll annoy Cable, and that'll be interesting to see how Cable handles that, because Cable's the star of the book, not Deadpool. And that was it. So I made him a little bit of a wise ass, and the readers responded really, really positively. They responded very positively to a combination of the design for the character that Rob had come up with, and the unexpected aspect of the character, which was he was a jerk, and mercenaries usually aren't like that. And the mail was super, super positive on that issue to begin with, but a lot of it mentioned Deadpool and wanting to see him come back, because a lot of people don't even think about the fact that he appears in 7 pages in that first appearance. He could have easily have been a throwaway character. He could have been any random mercenary number 6 popping in, fighting the good guy and losing, but the combination of the design idea Rob had, which was really just taking a basic Spider-Man design template and adding the weaponry to it, was a very, very strong visual. It really jumped out on the page, and I think that really helped. And the attitude that I gave him made him worth exploring. So from the very beginning, we knew that readers liked what they saw and wanted to see more. And Rob was going to bring them back anyway, because Rob liked drawing him, and I just had to figure out little by little as we went along why he was the way he was, why I was making him to have that attitude, that personality, all those things. And the character, to me, the character was as much perspiration as inspiration, because a lot of the things that made him stronger were folded into his personality template as we went along. And a lot of it was done when I wrote the first Deadpool miniseries, established that he had cancer, established that that's the reason why he went to the Weapon X program, that why he had the healing factor, established why it was constantly cycling in his body, which made him be in perpetual pain and perpetual kind of brain, acceleration. So those were all things that I just set up as a constantly, every opportunity, setting things up as a means of getting a chance to explore it further down the road. Because the entire first year of his appearances, it was just a few pages at a time. He was a subplot in the book, and he didn't get a chance to be explored a little more until his first miniseries. And by then Rob had already left the Form Image, so I had the responsibility of trying to figure out a lot of the details, and quite frankly, it was in those details that he became a character that resonated a little more strongly with the audience. It was a character that it wasn't just Bugs Bunny, it was Bugs Bunny meets Frankenstein's monster, which made for a much more interesting and compelling opportunity. And I didn't get to explore it any further because I left Marvel at that point, and it was for other people to explore. And then when they launched the monthly book a few years later, which wasn't until 1996, but when I came back and was writing for Marvel in 2004, and they offered me the Cable and Deadpool book for me, I was really excited because I had not read anything that had happened in between. In 10 years, I hadn't read any Deadpool books, and I was really excited for the opportunity, in my mind, to basically pick up where I left off. I wanted to just keep doing what I wanted to do with the character, and then I was told, you gotta brush up a little on what we've done because we have like 100 issues of material, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But I purposefully wrote the first 4 issues of Cable and Deadpool without having read any of the previous stuff. So I wrote the first few scripts just to see how I wanted him to be 10 years later after I'd written him before. And then I went back and reread like the first 2 years of Joe Kelly's run and little bits and pieces of other people's runs. And I said, oh, okay, I'm not, my interpretation of the character that I co-created is not very different from their interpretation of the character. So it's not like he evolved in a way that was completely different from how I had been thinking about him all along anyway,
And well, I'm not into I don't have a deep knowledge of the industry of comics. But for example, when you create a character in Marvel Comics, it belongs to Marvel, right?
Yes, it's work for hire. It's work for hire, and the company owns it. In the late 80s, early 90s, the company started to establish new character agreements where you have the opportunity to become financially compensated for the expansion of that character into other forms of entertainment, whether it be successful toys or video games or TV or movies. There'd be a pathway to be financially compensated for those extensions. And so we had new character agreements signed in the early 90s for a lot of those characters that we were working on, Deadpool being one of them. And Rob, Deadpool's the only character that I asked to be officially a co-creator on. I didn't ask it for any of the other characters I was scripting, like Domino or Shatterstar or Feral, because I felt that from the very beginning, Deadpool's popularity was a direct result of the combination of what Rob had done in introducing the character. His name was cool, his visual was cool, and that's what Rob had really introduced. And tying his origin into Wolverine's backstory gave him an interesting hook into the Marvel Universe. But the combination of the character's personality, the character's humor, the character's tragedy through his cancer and his tragic scarring and his body being all ravaged as a result of what he went through to save his life, that was all things I introduced. So to me, the character was a very strong synthesis of 2 voices. And that's why I asked to be co-creator on that character, not the others. And Rob agreed and Marvel agreed. So we've been legally co-creators from the very, very beginning. Because we were. I didn't feel that I was bringing enough to Domino or to Feral or to Shatterstar to make the same claim on those characters.
I understand. And right now, do you feel you have kind of the recognition that you expect from creating this character?
I honestly don't give a rat's ass.
Okay.
I don't care. I get
the cool
a check.
People know.
I get a check every year from Marvel. Every trade paperback and every hardcover that comes out says Deadpool co-created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza.
Great.
The Wikipedia page says Deadpool's co-created by Rob Liefeld. And if anyone else has any other perception, that's their own lack of information and their own lack of curiosity. It's not a lack of reality. It's not a lack of truth. The truth and reality are what they are, and it's your responsibility to find out about that truth and understand that reality. It's not my responsibility, So I, if your friend thinks Rob Liefeld created Deadpool and no one else did, that's fine. Your friend can do that. I don't care.
No,
it doesn't affect my life one bit on a daily basis.
Yeah. No, but I think most of the people know that you were kind of a co-creator or creator of Deadpool. So all the cool people know.
Well, my attitude has always been if you do a little bit of research, that automatically makes you smarter than the person who doesn't, right? So if
Sure,
you know because you did a little bit of research, then that makes you smarter than the person who didn't
sure.
do that research.
No, that's cool. And uh, so you were working in X Force, then you at the same time you were writing for X-Men,
Yep,
or
all at the same time. Ivan, there was a point where I was writing 6 books a month and working a full-time job at Marvel. At that point, I was no longer advertising manager. I'd moved over to the editorial department. So I was an editor at Marvel until about 1994, and then for a year I was a consultant working as an interdepartmental kind of liaison. And I was only coming in a couple days a week because I was doing so much writing work. But there was almost a
or
full year there where I was writing 6 books a month and working a full-time job, and
mm,
commuting into the city from New Jersey to New York, 90 minutes each way. So it was a little bit of a crazy time, but ultimately it was only 3 years of a 30-year
mm.
career.
And what the because I remember your period with X-Men, there was a lot of big events during that period.
Yeah,
You
big
were kind
events were
of
selling. Big events were selling a lot of comics, and the people who bought the company wanted to make a lot of money, so they wanted more
okay,
and more big events. They didn't care if that affected the quality of the material, or they
okay,
didn't care if it affected the flow of the storytelling. They just wanted big events that they could put cardboard covers on the comic and charge more money for it. So
holograms.
so we ended up being in a bit of a catch-22 because we were expected to do a lot of things for the company that we didn't think were the smartest things to be doing, but
Mm,
they were making everybody, including ourselves, a lot of money.
mm,
So it became a bit of a catch. We could
sure.
only fight so much within editorial because anytime we tried to complain and say that it's going to saturate the quality and it's going to hurt the quality of the books, which inevitably at some point is going to start to hurt the sales, for that 2-year window, 93 to 95, actually 3-year window, it really wasn't happening. It really
Mm,
wasn't affecting or hurting the sales of the books enough that the owners of the company would listen to us. It took almost the collapse of the retail shops and the over ordering on the part of many retailers hurting their business for that message to have gotten through, and by then it was too late already. But
mm,
I left Marvel in '95, so I really didn't have much to do with them in many ways for a few years because I was running Acclaim Comics from
but
'96 to '98.
during that X-Men run, there's I don't know, an issue or story that you like, or
Not really. No, not really.
not
Um,
need, not
we-
even the marriage of
the marriage was okay. That was a good issue. You got to understand, almost every issue, to one extent or another, was collaborative in an enforced way that I often didn't think made the book better.
okay.
So whether it was Bob Harris, the editor, having a lot of input,
So you were
or
not creative control that much.
no, and it's not a matter of expecting creative control. It's a matter of expecting the opportunity to create to your strengths. And
Mm,
and and I wasn't being allowed to create to my strengths, which is giving me a chance to plan 6 and 12 issues for what my book is going to be and where it's going to go, having a semblance of control over those subplots and over the characters I'm going to be using. So like
mm,
I would give a 6-month outline, and Mr. Sinister is going to be involved in 2 issues toward the end of that, and I'm going to build subplots to get to that point, and I get an approval on that, and then all of a sudden, by the time the 4th issue of that 6-issue flow happens, I see that Mr. Sinister is appearing in 5 other books within the course of 2 months, and you're like, wait a minute, what the hell's
what
going
the
on
fuck?
here? Because it throws off your ability to
Yeah,
properly plan, because what the hell's he doing in that book that's contradicting what you approved I was going to be allowed to do in this book? So it was way
sure.
too much decision making by the
Mm,
seat of your pants. It was way too much changing on
mm,
ideas that you had agreed upon, and and committed to, and that was happening way too much. So it wasn't really an entertaining, enjoyable way for me to write. So
Sure.
there's always moments within all of that was that was fun. There was always opportunities and issues that were good. But you're asking me 30 years later to look back on a 3-year window
Yeah,
of
of
my
course.
life that made me a lot of money, sold me a lot of comics, but wasn't creatively rewarding and fulfilling for me. And it
Yeah.
wasn't rewarding and fulfilling while I was doing it. So
Yeah.
30 years later, I'm only going to look back on it with a little
Yeah.
less, not a little
Yeah.
more
So I
happiness.
guess you were enjoying more doing, I don't know, New Warriors than.
I would say so, yeah. But
Yeah.
overall, like when you're that involved in the company, because you got to understand, I wasn't a freelance writer at that point. I was a staff employee of the company. I was involved and engaged in a lot of the decision making that was going on. I was aware of a lot of the decision making that was happening. There was a lot of things that were happening which were good and bad at the same exact time. So it colors a lot of everything. So I was doing way more than I should have been doing, both on both fronts, both 9 to 5 in the office and freelance as a writer.
Sure.
So as a result, all of it became an incredibly agitating, incredibly difficult and challenging. So even my memories of New Warriors are ridiculously fond for the first few years, but then by the time I decided to leave the book, I quit a book that I loved writing. You know, there had to be reasons why I quit a book that I loved writing. And the truth of the matter is at that point I was starting to lose my enthusiasm to write for Marvel because of the intermingling of all of these different factors. It was no longer about my love of the characters in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
It was no longer about my love of writing. It was about having to combine my creative work with the issues and aspects and challenges that were happening in the business part of it. And it was souring me to the company. So that's, so ultimately by 95, I was gone. I left. I started quitting every title. I got fired off X-Force. I quit X-Men. I quit Cable. I quit New Warriors. I quit Night Thrasher. I quit Nova. Nomad got canceled. So, you can see it just disappeared. Mark Grunwald asked me to write Captain Marvel in 1995.
Nomad?
And I said,
you were writing Nomad?
Yes, I was writing Nomad. Ivan, you got to do a bibliography search before you have the interview, because you keep asking me questions about books I wrote 30 years ago.
Sorry.
Like it's supposed to be a surprise for me.
I really love the.
But I just appreciate the tone of your voice. Like you're surprised that I should be aware that I wrote Nomad. You wrote Nomad? Yes, I did. Yes, I wrote Nomad for 25 issues and a miniseries.
Because I don't know if it was very successful or not. But
not really. No. The irony was that I was getting to
really cool.
I was getting to explore more interesting avenues of writing and more interesting avenues of storytelling in Nomad than I was in any other title, even New Warriors, which gave me opportunities to do a lot of that. But I was writing Marvel's #1 selling book, which was X-Men, and I was writing Marvel's second to last lowest selling book, which was Nomad, at the same exact time. And Nomad was also an incredible frustration because there were things I wanted to explore that I wasn't going to be allowed to explore because they thought that it was too controversial subject matter and topics that if you look back on it through the course of time, you would shrug your shoulders and go, really? They had a problem with that? Well, yeah, in 1992 or 1993, they had a problem with doing AIDS-related stories and doing sexuality-related stories in the comics, and they had problems with that back then. We stretched the envelope as much as we possibly could, and for me, it was frustrating because it wasn't stretching it as much as I wanted to.
Sure. No, but so you quit Marvel and you moved to the competition, or you start to
No,
work
I wrote one thing. I co-wrote a Justice League project for DC with Mark Waid, but I didn't really want to be a freelance writer at that point. I really wanted to run a comic book company. So Acclaim, which used to be Valiant, offered me that opportunity. They had offered it to me a year earlier, and it wasn't within the right parameters. So by the time it became the right parameters, I accepted it. So in the summer of '96, I became a claims editor-in-chief. And by the time I closed the comic operations down in New York in mid 1998, I was the company's president and publisher because the original president and publisher, Steve Masarsky, had left. And I initiated the closing down of the company because the revenue generation wasn't there that it needed to be. So we reduced staff by 2/3 and moved the remaining personnel to the parent company's offices out of Manhattan in Long Island. And I just did that long enough to try to let those people establish themselves there to see if they were going to be able to continue to work there or not. I knew I wasn't going to because I lived almost 2.5, 3 hours away in terms of commuting. So I left Acclaim, I think it was July of 1998. Walked out the door, and like I said earlier, on that Monday, I got a call from Marvel offering me Gambit as a monthly series. So I started writing again. So I wrote Gambit as a monthly series. I did some stuff for DC. They offered me Thunderbolts a short time later. So I was writing Gambit and Thunderbolts as 2 books. But I was already looking to do things other than comics, which is when the intellectual property management work that I mentioned earlier started.
No, that's amazing. And you were telling before, maybe off there, that you wrote your first book.
I started writing. I had a book idea that I had wanted to do for over 25 years, and I never did it. And I finally started in very, very late 2017. And I wrote it on and off, little bits and pieces, because it wasn't my primary focus, all through 2018. I finished it in early 2019. I had people read it, and I hired an editor to look at it and give me feedback and advice. So off of those notes, I started trimming and cutting a lot of fat off of it, and I got an agent in the summer of 2019 who loved it and wanted to represent it, and an agency that really thought it was a good book and had a lot of opportunities or potential to be more than just a book. We sold it to Putnam Publishing, which is Penguin Random House Putnam, and Putnam is the company I worked for out of college in 1983. That was my first job out of college. Was Putnam Berkeley. It was called Putnam Berkeley Publishing back then. So they bought the book. It's a sarcastic suburban mystery. It is called Suburban Dicks. It is not superheroes. It is not fantasy. It is not action adventure. It is a cynical exploration of life in the suburbs through a murder mystery story. And because we had multiple publishers interested in it, it turned into a 2-book deal. So I'm currently writing the second book in what I hope will be an ongoing series of books with these characters. The second book is called The Cellulitists. Take the word cellulite and take the word elitist and put it together. And it's continuing many of the same characters, but a very, very different mystery in the second book than in the first.
Kind of like, I know you will hate this.
Oh yeah, if you're going to compare it to something, I'm going to hate it. It's kind of like What It Is what I think, but you go ahead and give it a shot. Since you've never read it and all I did is give you 3 sentences about it, you tell me what it's kind of like.
No, I will just...
no, Ivan, go for it.
For myself. No, because Mystery Subur's Desperate Housewife.
No, not really. I mean, I guess.
I don't know, an extreme version.
I guess that you could. I guess you could see that. Yeah. The thing though is that I had this story 15 years before there was ever such a thing as Desperate Housewives. So I'm not comparing. Others will compare it to things, and if it gets turned into a TV show, which it might, at least have the opportunity to become one, they're going to compare it to things. But because I've had this thing lock, stock, and barrel, the first book
Sure.
was already everything about it, characters, story breakdown, the mystery, all the major beats I had in my mind since 1993, 1994. It barely changed at all when I actually started writing the book. So to me, you can compare it to anything you want, but it's been in here for that long anyway.
Yeah, no,
so
I was not trying to make a comparison, just like a point of reference to,
No, there's a little bit
but
of something.
it's not a
that,
reference. No, sorry.
The other thing, like the thing when we were talking to the TV producers, one of the comparisons that I was totally comfortable with, because it's a show I personally love, the first season on Netflix, Dead to Me. There can be a lot of comparisons in that regard to that. But
my girlfriend loved that show.
I love the first season. Not as much the second season, but I love the first season. But again, that's a comparison that you can make from the standpoint of the tone, and of the book. But it is a murder mystery in that the two lead characters are a reporter and someone a housewife who should have been an FBI forensic analyst. She should have been that, but she didn't give herself the chance to be that. So the two people that are driving the story are professionals in the course of their investigation. They just exist in a very odd, unprofessional world called, the suburbs of New Jersey.
No, but that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm pretty damn happy. While the world is locked down during a pandemic, I feel very, very guilty because I'm having a lot of fun getting to do what I've wanted to do for the last 30 years, which is write books.
Yeah, that's great, because a lot of people, for example, I don't know, I know a lot of bands that they need to tour, they need to play concerts, they need to do a lot of stuff. You as a writer, you just need your brain and a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the brain and the computer. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And they both go with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
So I can walk from the bedroom to the living room to the dining room, and my brain and my laptop both go with me everywhere.
And I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you already saw the show The Old Guard.
I saw the movie on Netflix a couple weeks ago when it first came out.
Yeah, not the
I
show,
never read the comics though.
Yeah, but what I think is great is that I don't know if it's the first time, but it's the first time that all people know that the writer of that comic book is the guy who made the script.
Yeah, Greg Rucka wrote the screenplay. That happens a lot, though. That happens a lot. James Robinson just wrote an episode of Stargirl that just aired, and Jeff Johns has written episodes of TV shows, and half of the writers who have written for Supergirl, Green Arrow, and The Flash have at one point or another all been comic book writers. The irony being, many of them didn't succeed as comic book writers, but now they're succeeding as Hollywood TV writers.
Sure,
you can run you go to double digits when you start getting to the point of the people that are now getting more opportunities to do that kind of thing.
And it happened to you sometime, or that is something that you would like to do?
I want an opportunity if Suburban Dicks becomes a TV show on a streaming platform. Part of the contractual discussion has been I want to be in the writer's room with the intention that at one point I want to write one of the episodes. I'm not imposing myself in that I have to write it. I could have negotiated it in a way that I would have been able to write the pilot, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to give them any excuse to say no.
Okay.
So to me,
leave the door
I'm
open.
better served by being in the room and getting the opportunity to do that as we go along. I have I have all the confidence and comfort in the world that I can handle that formatting because I've written in that formatting a lot. I've done a lot of spec work. I've done a lot of video game script work. I've done animation work. I'm incredibly comfortable with screenplay format. And I know that I will do a good job, but I don't want it to be an contractual imposition. I'd rather it be a creative decision. You know, like whoever the showrunner is, whoever the other writers in the writers' room are, they're very, very happy with the idea that I get to write episode 8, you know, or episode 7. And it'll happen. It's just a matter of time. I wrote my first book and sold my first book at 58. Let's see, I could have my first TV show on air at 61 and write my first TV episode at 62. Whatever, you know, it'll all be good. And if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't happen, I'm not dying unhappy, because to me, it's not like you're climbing any kind of ladder. To me, no matter what kind of writing it is, the ladders are all the same. I enjoy writing a story for 5-year-old kids, an animated cartoon for 5-year-old kids, just as much as I enjoy writing Juggernaut miniseries for Marvel, just as much as I enjoy writing an R-rated book, a prose mystery novel. You know, I like all of it. I just enjoy the process. So it's not about an achievement to me if I get to do that. For me, it's just the opportunity to explore a different way of approaching craft.
No, there's a great way to see it, you know, because some people get frustrated when they don't. A
lot of writers validate themselves based on the notion that they're climbing a ladder or reaching a wider audience or making more money. And I totally understand that, because that's the way as a society we kind of establish what is considered growth or success. But the good thing or the bad thing about my career is that I had tremendously high sales and made a lot of money when I first started. Within the first 6 years of starting out as a comic book writer, I was selling 1.7 million comics a month, making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And that was when I was 31, 32 years old. So it changed the formula in my brain. It changed the equation in my brain. To me, over the last 30 years, I'm not trying to climb a ladder to make more money, because I don't know that I'll make more money. Even a TV sale, even this book contract, they're all really, really good, but it's not as much money as I made back then. So I look at it in a very different way. I understand how others look at it the way they do, but I don't. It's not. It's no longer about the money to me, and it's no longer about the platform creates one level of validation or another. It doesn't. You know, writing a TV show doesn't validate me as a writer any more or less than having written a comic book does. You know, or having sold a novel does. It's all very, very much of the same thing to me.
Well, Fabian Nicieza, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. It's time for dinner. It's almost time for dinner here.
Yeah, no, I really thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Almost 1 hour and a half. I asked a lot of awful questions that you was very nice to answer.
No, and you asked me a lot of questions that I've been asked before, so I had the answers ready. I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
I don't have a headache after this one.
Yeah, of course. Well, maybe we can make another time and talk about.
How about when the book comes out next year, you read it, and then we talk about the differences between writing different formats and different platforms.
Yeah,
okay?
that will be awesome. And I really thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan. I appreciate it.
Really is
have a good night
for me.
Stay safe over there in France, okay?
Yeah, you too.
Don't be stupid like we are here in the United States.
Yeah, man.
Take care. Have a good one.
Take care.